Book 19. Dawn, shrouded in saffron, rose out of the deep water with light for immortals and humans alike. And Thetis came to the ships with Hephaestus's gifts. She found her son lying beside his Patroclus, wailing, and around him his many friends, mourning. The silvery goddess stood in their midst, took his hand, whispered his name, and said to him, Achilles, you must let him rest, no matter our grief. This man was gentled by the gods, but you, my son, my darling, take this glorious armor from Hephaestus, so very beautiful, no man has ever worn anything like it. She spoke, and when she set the armor down before Achilles, all the metal work clattered and chimed. The Myrmidons shuddered, and to a man could not bear to look at it. But Achilles, when he saw it, felt his rage seep deeper into his bones, and his lids narrowed and lowered over eyes that glared like a white-hot steel flame. He turned the polished weapons the god had given him over and over in his hands and felt pangs of joy at all its intricate beauty, and his words rose on wings to meet his mother. My mother, a god has given me these weapons. No mortal could have made them, and it is time I arm myself in them. But I am afraid for Patroclus, afraid that flies will infest his wounds and breed worms in his body. Now the life is gone, and his flesh turned foul and rotten. The silver-footed goddess answered, Do not let that trouble you, child. I will protect him from the swarming flies that infest humans slain in war. Even if he should lie out for a full year, his flesh would still be as firm or better. But call an assembly now. Renounce your rage against Agamemnon. Arm yourself for war and put on your strength. Saying this, she multiplied his heroic temper. Then she dripped ambrosia and ruby nectar through Patroclus's nostrils to keep his flesh firm. And then Achilles went along the shore, etched in sunlight, and shouted so loud that not only the heroes came out, but all those too who had spent the war among the encamped ships, all the pilots and oarsmen and stewards and cooks. They all came to the assembly then, because Achilles, who had abstained a long time, was back. Limping along were the two veterans, battle-scarred Diomedes and brilliant Odysseus, badly wounded, using their spears as crutches. They came in and sat at the front of the assembly, and behind them came the warlord Agamemnon, wounded himself, that spear thrust by Coon, son of Antenor, in a hard-fought battle. When all the Greeks were gathered together, swift-footed Achilles rose and addressed them. Well, son of Atreus, are either of us better off for this anger that has eaten our hearts away like acid, this bitter quarrel over a girl? Artemis should have shot her aboard my ship the day I pillaged Lyrnessus and took her. Far fewer Greeks would have gone down in the dust under Trojan hands while I nursed my grudge. Hector and the Trojans are better off, but the Greeks, I think they will remember our quarrel forever. But we'll let all that be, no matter how it hurts, and conquer our pride because we must. I hereby end my anger. There is no need for me to rage relentlessly. But let's move quickly now to get our troops back into battle, so I can confront the Trojans and test their will to bivouac among our ships. They will more likely be thankful to rest their knees at day's end, if any of them gets out of this alive. He spoke, and the Greeks cheered. Peleus' great son had renounced his rage. And then the warlord Agamemnon spoke from where he sat without rising among them. Friends, Danaan heroes, servants of Ares, it is right to listen to one who stands to speak, and unseemly for even a skilled orator to interrupt him. Even if he could make himself heard above the crowd, he would be at a disadvantage. What I have to say is this for the son of Peleus, but I want each of you to mark my words. There's not a Greek here who has not said spiteful things about me, but I am not to blame. Zeus is, and Fate, and the Dark Avenger, who put a fit of madness on me in public the day I robbed Achilles of his prize. But what could I do? Gods decide everything. Zeus's eldest daughter is the goddess Ate, who blinds everyone. A deadly power. She has delicate feet, not made for the ground, but for treading on the skulls of men as she afflicts them. Now and again she pins one down. Once she even blinded Zeus, who is, they say, the best of all, human or divine, even him. Hera, being female, hoodwinked him on the day Alcmena was due to give birth to mighty Heracles in coronated Thebes. Zeus had made this boast to all the gods. Hear me, all you gods and goddesses, while I say to you what is on my mind. This day shall Eilithyia, midwife goddess, bring to light a man who shall rule his land, one of the race of men who are of my own blood. And his lady Hera said to him craftily, Liar, you will never make this story come true. I dare you to swear me a great oath, Olympian, that whoever shall fall between a woman's legs today, provided he is one of your own bloodline, really will rule over all his neighbors. She spoke, and Zeus did not see through this trick, but swore a mighty oath, blinded as he was. Hera shot down from the peak of Olympus and came to Argos in Achaea, where she knew that the strong wife of Sthenelus, Perseus' son, was in the 7th month of her pregnancy. This child Hera brought to light prematurely, but delayed Alcmena's, holding back the birth spirits, for she brought the news to Zeus herself. Father Zeus, Lord of Lightning, important news. A man has been born who will rule the Argives. Eurystheus, born to Sthenelus, Perseus' son, of your own bloodline, fit to rule the Argives. This rankled deep in Zeus's heart. He seized Ate by her rich, bright hair, angry as can be, and swore a great oath that she would never again come to Olympus or to starry heaven. Whirling her around, he threw her from the sky, and she fell quickly to the fields of men. The very thought of her would make him groan, especially when he saw her own dear son performing unseemly labors for Eurystheus. That's how I felt when I saw great Hector slaughtering Argives at the sterns of our ships. I could not forget Ate, who had made me blind. Yes, I was blind. Zeus robbed me of my wits. But I want to make reparation generously. Rouse yourself and your soldiers for battle. I am here to promise you all the gifts Odysseus proposed in your hut last night. Or wait if you wish, though you're eager for war, while my men start bringing things from my ship. So you can see that my gifts will please your heart. And Achilles, strong and swift, answered him, Son of Atreus, most glorious Agamemnon, whether you offer me gifts, as is right, or keep them, is your concern. War is mine. Let's not waste any more time with speeches. We have work to do. I want each one of you to see Achilles fighting on the front line, destroying the Trojan ranks with his spear. Have that image in mind as you fight your man. Odysseus, the wily thinker, answered him, Achilles, we know how good you are, but don't send our men out to fight the Trojans without any food in their stomachs. It's not going to be a short battle once the two sides close and start feeling the god's breath working inside them. You should have our men go to their ships for food and wine and get their strength up. No one can fight all day until sunset on an empty stomach. He may have the heart, but as hunger and thirst creep up on him, his arms get heavy and his knees go slack. But a man who has had his fill of food and wine can fight all day long with confidence, and stays strong until the last man quits. So come, dismiss the troops and have them prepare their meal. As for the gifts, let Lord Agamemnon bring them out here, so that the whole army can see them. This will warm your heart, and he should stand and swear a public oath that he has not gone to the woman's bed. You, Achilles, should be gracious about this, and then he should complete his amends by feasting you richly, so you have all your due. Next time, son of Atreus, you will act more justly. There is no cause at all for offense when kings make their amends for unprovoked anger. And the warlord Agamemnon answered him, Son of Laertes, I am glad to hear your words. You have laid it all out just as it should be. I am ready and willing to swear this oath, and I will not perjure myself. But Achilles should wait here, eager as he is for war. All should wait here assembled until the gifts come from my hut, and we swear solemn oaths. And I lay this charge upon you, Odysseus. Choose the finest young men in all the army, and bring from my ships all the gifts we promised Achilles yesterday. The women, too. And Talthybius will prepare a boar for me to sacrifice before the army to Helios and Zeus. But swift-footed Achilles answered him, Son of Atreus, most glorious Agamemnon, you should do all this at some other time, when there is a break in the war, and when my rage is not so great. Hector has beaten these men to death. They are lying here mangled. He has the glory, and you two want us to eat? If it were up to me, I'd have the troops out there fighting, unfed, no food all day. When the sun goes down, we can have a big meal, our shame avenged. Until then, no food or drink will pass my lips at least. My comrade is dead, lying in my hut, mangled with bronze, his feet turned toward the door, and round him our friends grieve. Nothing matters to me now but killing and blood and men in agony. And Odysseus, with his many wiles, son of Peleus, strongest of the Achaeans, far stronger than me certainly with a spear, yet I might be better than you in counsel, since I have lived longer and come to know more. Have the patience to listen to my words. Men quickly have their fill of battle, where moving blades litter the ground with stalks, but there's very little to reap after Zeus decides the price in human lives with a tip of his scales. We can't mourn the dead with our bellies. There are too many corpses and more each day. When would anyone get time off from grief? No, we have to bury all our dead, steel our hearts, and mourn them for a day. The survivors must remember to eat and drink so we can go on fighting day after day until we wear out the enemy's bronze skin. Let no man hold back awaiting some other call. This is the call. There will be hell to pay for any man who stays here with the ships. Now let's move out. This is war. Odysseus spoke and was off, taking with him Nestor's sons Antilochus and Thrasymedes, along with Meriones and Lycomedes, Meges, the Dulichian, Thoas, the Aetolian, and Melanippus. They all went straight to Agamemnon's hut. No sooner said than done. They brought out 7 tripods as promised, a dozen bright cauldrons, and as many horses, and they quickly led out the women, faultless in their handiwork, 7 of these, and Briseis made 8. Then Odysseus weighed out the full 10 talents of gold, and led back the youths who carried the gifts, and set them in the middle of the assembly grounds. Agamemnon rose up, and Talthybius, whose voice was like a god, stood beside him, holding a boar. The son of Atreus drew the knife that hung by his sword scabbard and cut the boar's hairs. Then, lifting his hands to Zeus, he prayed, and all the Greeks sat silently, in the proper way, each man listening to his king, as he spoke in prayer, looking at the sky. Be Zeus my witness first, highest and best of gods, and earth and sun, and the Furies who underground take vengeance on men who break their oaths. I swear I never laid a hand on the girl Briseis, either to bed her or for anything else, but that she stayed untouched in my quarters. If any of what I swear is false, may the gods torment me as a transgressor of oaths. And he slashed the boar's throat with ruthless bronze. Talthybius whirled and threw the carcass into the open sea to be food for fish. Then Achilles rose and addressed the war-loving Achaeans. Father Zeus, great is the blindness you send to men, else Atreus' son never would have roused my rage or insisted on leading the girl away against my will. Somehow it has pleased Zeus that many Greeks should die. Now go to your meal so we can join battle. The assembly broke up, and the men scattered each to his own ship. The Myrmidons got busy with the gifts, bringing them to Achilles' ship. They stored it all in their huts, left the women there, and proudly drove the horses to the herd. Briseis stood there like golden Aphrodite. But when she saw Patroclus' mangled body, she threw herself upon him and wailed in a high, piercing voice, and with her nails she tore her breast and soft neck and lovely face. And this woman, so like a goddess, cried in anguish, My poor Patroclus, you were so dear to me. When I left this hut you were alive, and now I find you, the army's leader, dead when I come back? So it is for me always, evil upon evil. I have seen my husband, the man my father and mother gave me to, mangled with sharp bronze before my city, and my 3 brothers, all from the same mother, brothers I loved, they all died that day, but you wouldn't let me cry when Achilles killed my husband and destroyed Minos' city. Wouldn't let me cry. You told me you'd make me Achilles' bride, told me you'd take me on a ship to Phthia for a wedding among the Myrmidons. I will never stop grieving for you, forever sweet. Thus Briseis, and the women mourned with her, for Patroclus, yes, but each woman also for her own private sorrows. Round Achilles the Achaean elders gathered, begging him to eat, but he refused them, groaning, I beg you, my friends, aren't any of you listening? Don't keep asking me to satisfy my heart with food or drink before it is time. My grief is too great. I will stay as I am and endure until sunset. And he waved them off. Only Atreus' 2 sons remained with him, along with Odysseus, Nestor, and the old charioteer Phoenix, trying to comfort him in his grief's extremity. But he could not be comforted. His heart would ache until he lost himself in war's blood-stained mouth. Memories welled up and caught in his throat. There was a time, my ill-fated beloved friend, you would serve me a fine dinner in this hut, deftly and quickly, while the army hurried to bring war's sorrow to the horse-breaking Trojans. Now you lie here a mangled corpse, and my heart fasts from the food and drink that are here out of grief for you. I could not suffer worse, not even if I learned my father were dead, who perhaps is weeping back in Phthia right now, because he misses his son, who is off fighting on Trojan soil, for Helen, at whom we all shudder. Not even if it were my son Neoptolemus, who is being reared for me in Scyrus, if indeed my dear child is still alive. I had hoped until now that I alone would perish at Troy, and that you would return and take my boy in your swift black ship away from Scyrus, and show him all my things back home in Phthia, for Peleus by now must be dead and gone. Or if he does still live, he draws his breath in pain, clinging to a shred of life and always expecting the grim message that will tell him I am dead. He wept, and the elders added their laments to his, each remembering what he had left at home. Zeus saw them in their grief, and pitying them, spoke to Athena these feathered words. My child, have you deserted your warrior? Do you no longer have any thought for Achilles? He is mourning his friend, sitting there in front of his upswept hulls. Everyone else has gone off to dinner, but he refuses to eat. Go, drip some nectar and savory ambrosia into his breast, so he will not weaken with hunger. Athena needed no encouragement. She flew from the crystal sky like a shrill raptor and pounced on Achilles. The other Achaeans were busy arming for battle. Athena distilled nectar and ambrosia into Achilles' chest so that grim hunger would not weaken his knees, and then was gone back to her father's house, while the Greeks poured out from their beached ships. Snow flurries can come so thick and fast from the cold northern sky that the wind that bears them becomes an icy, blinding glare. So too the gleaming, polished weaponry, the helmets, shields, spears, and plated corselets, all the bronze paraphernalia of war that issued from the ships. The rising glare reflected on the coppery sky, and the land beneath laughed under the arcing metallic glow. A deep bass thrumming rose from the marching feet. And, like a bronze bolt in the center, Achilles, who now began to arm. His eyes glowed like white-hot steel, and he gritted his teeth against the grief that had sunk into his bones, and every motion he made in putting on the armor, forged for him in heaven, was an act of passion directed against the Trojans. Clasping on his shins the greaves trimmed in silver at the ankles, strapping the corselet onto his chest, slinging the silver-studded bronze sword around a shoulder, and then lifting the massive heavy shield that spilled light around it as if it were the moon, or a fire that has flared up in a lonely settlement high in the hills of an island, reflecting light on the faces of men who have put out to sea and must watch helplessly as rising winds bear them away from their dear ones. So too the terrible beauty of Achilles' shield, a fire in the sky. He lifted the helmet and placed it on his head, and it shone like a star with the golden horsehair Hephaestus had set thickly on the crest rippling in waves. He tested the fit and flex of the armor, sprinting on the sand, and found that the metal lifted him like wings. He pulled from its case his father's spear, the massive heavy spear that only Achilles could handle because of Pelion ash, which the centaur Chiron had brought down from Mount Pelion and given to Achilles' father, to be the death of heroes. Automedon and Alcimus harnessed the horses, cinched the leather straps, fit the bits in their jaws, and drew the reins back to the jointed chariot. Automedon picked up the bright lash and jumped into the car, and behind him Achilles stepped in, shining in his war gear like an amber sun. And in a cold voice he cried to his father's horses, Xanthus and Balius, Podarges' famous colt, see that you bring your charioteer back safe this time, when we have had enough of war, and not leave him for dead as you left Patroclus. And from beneath the yoke Xanthus spoke back, hooves shimmering, his head bowed so low that his mane swept the ground, as Hera, the white-armed goddess, gave him a voice. This time we will save you, mighty Achilles, this time, but your hour is near. We are not to blame, but a great God and strong fate. Nor was it slowness or slackness on our part that allowed the Trojans to despoil Patroclus. No, the best of gods, fair-haired Leto's son, killed him in the front lines and gave Hector the glory. As for us, we would outrun the west wind. which men say is the swiftest, but it is your destiny to be overpowered by a mortal and a god. Xanthus said this. Then the Furies stopped his voice, and Achilles, greatly troubled, answered him. I don't need you to prophesy my death, Xanthus. I know in my bones I will die here, far from my father and mother. Still I won't stop until I have made the Trojans sick of war. And with a cry, he drove his horses to the front.